Hello, I'm John Delano, KDKA TV political editor. Thanks for joining us for a special Senate debate edition of Inside Pennsylvania Politics, where today we are focusing on the race for Pennsylvania's U.S. Senate seat between incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey and Republican challenger Dave McCormick. I'm joined by our panel. They are young, politically active Pennsylvanians from diverse backgrounds and opinions. I'm the only old guy here, which makes sense because elections are really about the future. Joining us on the right side of our panel, Isabella Russo, Oakmont resident and local grassroots director of Americans for Prosperity. Enrico Elmore, Rochester Borough resident and vice chair of the Beaver County Republican Party. Joining us on the left side of our panel, Christian Sesek, Fayette County resident and chair of the Fayette County New Deal Democrats, and Lauren Williams, Southside resident and president of the Young Democrats of Allegheny County. Let's talk about the Pennsylvania Senate race. Incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey and Republican challenger Dave McCormick will meet on the debate stage on Thursday, October 3rd at 8 p.m. You can watch it simulcast on KDKA+. Let's do a quick bio on both candidates. Senator Bob Casey is from Scranton and is the son of Bob Casey Sr., who served as Pennsylvania governor from 1987 to 1995. Casey attended Catholic universities for undergrad and law school and was elected Pennsylvania's Auditor General from 1996 to 2005. He lost the 2002 primary for governor to Ed Rendell, but then he beat Republican incumbent Senator Rick Santorum for his U.S. Senate seat in 2006. He's the first Democrat in Pennsylvania to be elected to 3 consecutive Senate terms and is looking to make it a 4th. Dave McCormick was born in Washington, PA, and went to high school in Columbia County. He attended West Point, became an Army Ranger, and served in the First Gulf War. He then went to Princeton and entered the business world. He earned $500 million from the sale of free markets in Pittsburgh as its CEO in 2004. He served in George W. Bush's administration as Undersecretary of Commerce and Undersecretary of the Treasury for International Affairs. He then joined Bridgewater, one of the world's largest hedge funds and based in Connecticut, from 2009 to 2022, when he first ran for Senate. Now, taking a look at recent polls in Pennsylvania voters, the race is consistently tight. All of these polls ended between September 25th and September 29th. Casey has a consistent lead between 1 and 3 points, but that's within the margin of error, which means it could be reversed, but maintaining that lead in each of these polls. So turning to our panel now, why is this race so very important in the United States? Christian?
Well, we get 2 senators from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And Bob Casey, in my perspective and in my opinion, has done a great job for 3 terms of bringing home the bacon, so to speak. I have here, just in fiscal year 24, tens of millions of dollars in community development funds that have come to communities like mine in Brownsville. I've been fortunate enough to meet Senator Casey. They're on the ground. They're our voice in Congress at the federal government.
But nationally, isn't the Senate really up for grabs?
Oh, it is.
So what do you think, Isabella? Is it important from a national perspective as well as Pennsylvania?
Oh, I mean, definitely. I think Dave McCormick can bring a lot to the table. You know, he's a businessman. Something that I love about him is he's not a career politician. Like you just said, Bob Casey's been in there for almost 18 years. I think as a state, we need new leadership and we need those opinions.
Let me switch back to the Democratic side and ask Lauren here from Allegheny County. What do you think of this race? How important is it?
I think you hit it on the head, right? This is going to essentially decide who's going to be in control of our Senate for the next 4 years. And so I think it's important that Pennsylvania really decide who has done the job before and who has continued to deliver for us versus someone who just kind of showed up and decided that they wanted the job. I think Bob Casey has proven himself time after time to be a good senator. And when we think about who's going to hold the majority, especially in consideration with the president, we're going to want someone who knows how to do the job.
Enrico, you get the last word on this one. This is an important race?
I think this is a very important race because when you look at how the economy is today, you can directly correlate that to Senator Casey being in office. So from his past 18 years of actually being in office and doing things, we are at where we are at today with a failing economy. So we need to change that by getting someone who knows how to go headstrong, go forward, and make a change. He provided jobs when he was a CEO. He also was in the military, and he led. So he's a good leader, he's a good businessman, and that's what we need here in Pennsylvania.
Well, I want to focus now on some of the criticisms that we've heard of both candidates and get your thoughts on that. Dave McCormick has faced a number of criticisms through both his 2022 primary campaign and this campaign. He's perceived as not being from Pennsylvania. He has lived in Connecticut for years and maintains a residence there, which he says is for his daughters as they finish high school. Critics say he's out of touch because of his hedge fund background and investments in China. He's been accused of outsourcing jobs from Pittsburgh to India as CEO of Free Markets. He says those were layoffs, not outsourcing. He was a principal economic advisor to President George W. Bush during the run-up to the 2008 global financial crisis that led to the Great Recession. And he was a strong supporter of the invasion of Iraq, which he defends. So Democratic Senator Bob Casey has represented Pennsylvania since 2007. In that time, he's come in for criticism from both the left and the right. For years, he frequently battled more liberal Democrats over his pro-life stance and votes for anti-abortion policies. But he reversed his position in 2022 after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and now says he supports a national law to codify abortion rights. And while Casey was one of 7 Democrats to help Republican senators block a ban on fracking in 2021, McCormick has tied Casey to Vice President Harris's previous opposition to fracking. And frankly, some just say Casey hasn't done much as a senator. So, panel, how do these criticisms affect the debate that's coming up? What do you think, Isabel?
I think, especially when it comes to Bob Casey, people are wondering about his stance on fracking. I think a lot of Democrats go back and forth because one side of things, they want Republicans and independents to agree that, we need to drill, baby, drill, you know what I mean? And especially in our state of Pennsylvania, we're big on that, and we should be energy independent. That is something that Dave McCormick has believed in since he started running. So just as that, for an example, I think that is going to be such a crucial debate topic coming up here.
Interesting. And just to be clear, so everybody understands what fracking is, because I'm not sure people do, it's a method by which we extract the natural gas that we use in Pennsylvania to heat our homes and our factories. And you drill down, and then you kind of like a spider web. It just reaches out all around for miles at a point to bring that natural gas up using water. And there's lots of debates about it, but we do it here in Pennsylvania. What do you think, Christian? Is Bob Casey pro-fracking or anti-fracking?
I think that Western Pennsylvania has demonstrated what fracking can do for an economy, and I think that Bob Casey has done a good job of balancing, making sure that our environment is protected as well as what is good for jobs and employment. And I think that in this specific debate, Dave McCormick needs to answer for those jobs that were outsourced. And I know that from experience, when I've spoken with Senator Casey, he's familiar with Monessen, which is the steel coke plant where my father works. He knows these areas, he knows these folks, he knows these manufacturing jobs and how critical they are to places like ours in Western Pennsylvania. And so that's something that I think Dave McCormick will have to answer for.
Well, let me move to another criticism, though, of McCormick, and that is this Connecticut connection. He obviously lived in Connecticut for a number of years when he was the CEO of Bridgewater Associates, the giant hedge fund. Do you think that's a criticism that sticks, Rico?
I believe that when people speak on Dave McCormick living in Connecticut, they need to also realize the fact that in our Constitution it says you have to be a part of the state or live in the state that you're running for. So under the constitutional guidelines, he fits that. He has residency in Pennsylvania.
I think it's a one-year requirement.
Yes.
So he's certainly been here for at least a year because he
Yes.
ran in the 2022 primary against Mehmet Oz. So he fulfills that requirement, no question about it.
No questions at all. So I think it's more of people speak up on it and not knowing what the process is.
Right.
So I think they need a little bit more education before they speak on it.
Well, even though he's constitutionally able to run, Lauren, do you think the fact that he lived in Connecticut makes a difference to voters?
I think it does. I think just because you're qualified to do something doesn't mean you really are, right? I think the fact that he lived in Connecticut for so long just shows that he is not in touch with what Western Pennsylvania, for example, is looking for, or the state of Pennsylvania as a whole. Excuse me, the Commonwealth. And so
Oh, yeah, we are a Commonwealth.
I think it's important that when you run for office, especially on the senatorial level, that you really understand what Joe Schmo in Allegheny County or Beaver County is looking for in the fight that they're having to live every single day. And I think someone who's been in Connecticut can't necessarily do that.
Yeah. I want to just ask a quick question. We don't have much time in this segment, but let me turning to the left of our panel. What are your predictions for the debate? What do you think is going to happen, Kristen?
I'm not really sure, because we've seen a lot of what's going to happen in the debate play out for the last 6 months on television. I think that we know the talking points for both sides, and I hope that this doesn't hurt KDKA, but in some ways I think that it's become like a prescription drug commercial. I think that the voters have more or less tuned out the ads and the talking points, and I think that a lot of what we're going to hear is going to be a continuation of that.
Yeah, do you think anybody's going to be, I hate to say this, watching this debate?
I mean, I think so.
Good,
I think a lot
good.
of people are concerned with what's going on in the country. People are having a hard time paying their bills, getting gas, and inflation's at an all-time high, and we need someone to also secure our border. So I think people truly care about this year for a particular reason, so I hope they tune in.
Rico, what do you think?
I think that people are going to watch that because it affects them personally. You know, this is a checks and balance. You have the president, you have the Senate, you have Congress, you have the House, you have individuals who checks and balance, and we have to keep putting that forward. So this is very important to their natural everyday life.
And Lauren, you get the last word on the debates. Do you think that this is something that's going to make a difference in this election?
I don't know that it's going to make a difference. I'm not really convinced that debates themselves make a difference, but I do think people are going to pay attention to see if they themselves can predict based off the debate how their candidate is doing. And I think we're going to hear a lot of Dave McCormick convincing or trying to convince people that he is a moderate and that Bob Casey's going to just continue to talk about his record.
Well, we're going to wrap up our discussion there. That was a really good one. Appreciate it very much. Coming up, we're breaking down the nationwide Senate map and where polls show things are leaning, and how the Pennsylvania Senate race is a keystone of control over Congress. Stick with us. Welcome back. I'm John Delano. One of the reasons why Pennsylvania's Senate race is so critical is because whichever party controls the Senate will either be able to accomplish or block the president's legislative agenda. There are 34 seats up for election this year, with Democrats or independents defending 23 of those. This map from poll tracking site 270 to Win shows which states have contested races and which direction the polls show those races leaning. Right now in the 118th Congress, Democrats hold 51 seats to Republicans 49. Polls show contested races in places like Montana and West Virginia are likely to flip from Democratic held to Republican, putting the GOP in control for the 119th Congress. Let's now turn to our panel. The makeup of the legislative branch will go a long way towards whether the next president can accomplish his or her agenda. Do you think the candidates are doing enough to shore up those down-ballot races that will be critical to their administration? We're talking now about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Are they doing enough to help Senate candidates like Dave McCormick and Bob Casey? Isabella, what do you think?
I definitely think so. Trump has come out and fully endorsed Dave McCormick for U.S. Senate. I know they've done multiple events together, and he's also done events with J.D. Vance as well. So I think, one, they're supporting each other and they're working together to hopefully win in November.
How do you feel about Casey? Is Kamala Harris getting the support he needs to win?
I think so, John, and I know that they've also done some coordinated efforts. And let's not forget that Vice President Harris served with Bob Casey in the Senate. So she knows him well, and she's familiar with the senator. And so I think that there's a shared experience there and a camaraderie.
Yeah. Well, you're a party official in Allegheny County, Lauren. Does it matter, these down-ballot races? I know in the race for U.S. Senate, it's really the next race, right after the president on the ballot. Does it make a difference if the president is supporting or not supporting, or what he or she is doing?
For sure, but I definitely think for this specific race, it looks a little bit different. Bob Casey has been in the Senate for 3 terms already, and he has really made a name for himself in Pennsylvania. I would go as far to say he's probably the most beloved politician in Pennsylvania. Yeah. And so I think it's actually a lot of Harris leaning on Casey to help her win Pennsylvania. And I think that is work that Bob Casey can do. And I think that together they can take Pennsylvania. Yeah.
So you really think that Harris is more dependent on Casey than the other way around?
For sure. I think Kamala Harris has to win Pennsylvania, right? And unlike Joe Biden, she doesn't necessarily have roots in Pennsylvania. And so for her, I think leaning on Bob Casey and his expertise on winning statewide in Pennsylvania is important. And so they've done events together, as you said. And I think they're going to continue to do events together to really help bolster her name in the state.
Right. Well, let's ask Rico about on the Republican side as a party official. What do you think? Does Donald Trump help Dave McCormick, being better known, I presume, than McCormick?
I think in name recognition, yes. Having the former president support you as a candidate means a lot to an individual. Mm-hmm. But I also want people to realize that these are 2 distinct different people and that you need to do your own research on to who McCormick is, what McCormick does, and the things that he wants to push forward, also with Trump as well, because you can't combine the 2 together because there are 2 different people with 2 different agendas.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is, you know, for many years, I used to always say that Pennsylvanians love to split their tickets. They'd vote Democrat for one, Republican for another, go back and forth. I see a little less of that these days, but we still see some of it. Do you think split tickets in this race for president and U.S. Senate is likely or not likely this year? What do you think? Real quick.
I think it's very likely. In fact, I spoke with one individual who told me that they got registered to vote for the first time, and they're voting for Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, and then they intend to vote for Bob Casey. And I also anticipate that with a win for Bob Casey, he will likely outperform Vice President Harris in Pennsylvania, and some of the past has shown us that with those statistics.
What do you think? Split tickets? Possible? Likely?
I personally think there will be some of that, especially in the independent voters this year. I also have talked to people in my community, and a lot of them have told me that they're planning on voting for Dave McCormick, but they're either not sure at the top of the ticket or they were considering voting for Vice President Harris.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. So we could get, you know, Harris McCormick, or we could get Trump Casey. Very interesting. We have to wrap right now, so I'm sorry I can't get to you guys. We'll start with you in the next panel. So coming up, political ads. The Senate candidates go really negative on TV. So how are voters reacting to this barrage of ads? Stick it with us. Welcome back. I'm John Delano with our panel of young political activists. Let's talk TV ads. Both candidates have gone negative, and I mean really negative, against each other in their TV ads, attacking each other for the perceived weaknesses we discussed up top. Is that negativity working, or is it turning off voters? Rico, let's start with you. What do you think?
I think that all the negativity that's being projected is totally uncharacterized. I think that it shows a different side of politics and how dirty and grimy it can get. But I also think that if people believe so much into these negative ads, that they're not doing their due diligence to learn about the candidates. So find the truth behind the ad before believing in what you see.
What do you think, Lauren?
I don't think negative ads are inherently bad. I think it is the job of each candidate to educate the masses about themselves and their opponents. I think with assuming that the average voter doesn't do research, but that they'll watch TV and they'll see these ads, it's a way of informing them. With that being said, I do think sometimes we get a little bit too aggressive on it, and we're not being as fair as we can be to the fellow opponent.
You know, my comment on this, and of course I've seen a lot of negative ads over the 30 years that I've been with KDKA TV, and I'll just tell you right off the bat that, first of all, there's no truth in advertising rules with respect to campaign ads. If I sell a product, I have to be truthful or I'll get in trouble. Mm-hmm. But when you're selling a candidate, you can lie. And they lie. A lot of them lie a lot. Mm. And it's, you know, I mean, for example, in this campaign, you would believe that either Dave McCormick or Bob Casey is responsible for 4,000 fentanyl deaths in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you believe some of the negative ads. Now, neither one of those gentlemen has gone out and killed 4,000 people. And I don't even think their policies have contributed to that, regardless of their relationships to Congress or bills or immigration or anything. But that's what you hear. So, you know, it's really tough. We're going to give Christian, and we'll give you a really quick wrap up on this. Negative ads, do they work?
I think that they work, but I think that people, as I mentioned earlier, tune them out as well. And I think that when you keep repeating the same thing over and over, eventually it will lose its effect.
Yeah. Isabella?
I think earlier in the election cycle, people were maybe paying more attention and they were believing them more. But as time goes by and the more people are hearing them speak and do interviews, they're starting to tune them out. They're muting their TVs, and then they just don't really care anymore.
Yeah, particularly the repetition gets to you.
Yep.
Well, thank you. This was great discussion. Appreciate it. We're going to take a pause for another quick break, and then we'll be back with some final thoughts. Stick with us. Welcome back. Time now for some final thoughts from our panelists ahead of the Senate debate. What advice do you guys have for Bob Casey in this debate, Kristen?
Remind voters that you are Bob Casey from Scranton, Pennsylvania, born and raised, and that they know you.
Lauren?
Focus on the issues.
Focus on the issues. Rico?
Remind people that you believe in them so they can believe in you.
This is, of course, advice from McCormick.
2 words for Dave McCormick to bring is bring unity.
Bring unity. Great. Thank you, panelists, very much. And thanks for watching this special episode of Inside Pennsylvania Politics, previewing the U.S. Senate debate between Senator Bob Casey and Dave McCormick. You can catch us every week through the election at 11 a.m. on Thursday, streaming on CBS News Pittsburgh, and on KDKA Plus at 12:30 on Sunday afternoons. Thanks to our panelists, and thanks again to you for watching. Remember, our government is only as good as you make it. Be sure to vote. Have a great day, everyone.